Welcome into another edition of New Track Record podcast from the WELT studios in Fort Wayne. Caleb Hatch with you and Justin Kinney joining us from an undisclosed location.
Undisclosed, also known as my office.
Yeah.
Duty beckoned today, not able to pull myself away.
Absolutely. Well, we have plenty to discuss on this episode. We start, obviously, the main story, and this will be our focus, but Doug Boles promoted to the president of not just the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, a role he previously and continues to hold at the moment, but also the president of IndyCar. Jay Frye out, Doug Boles in, a massive shift, plus a couple other changes in leadership as well within IndyCar. That's the main story this week. Plus, we'll tell you how you can join our IndyCar Fantasy League, new for this year. They make it a lot easier for you to sign up. And hey, why not a little tidbit on a third OEM as well, and more changes in Indy Lights. And I think my favorite livery has been unveiled as well. That's all to come on this week's episode. Before we get things rolling, how are you, Justin?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Doing well. Getting through the cold of winter. Just had like a snow ice storm thing last night. Not as bad as originally predicted, per usual. But look, we're essentially, 2 weeks away? It's unbelievable to think about.
We are. We had the Super Bowl last weekend. We have Daytona coming up this Sunday, and then it's just basically 2 weeks until we kick the season off at St. Pete, and we still wonder who's going to be in that coin seat.
Yeah, real quick, before we get going discussing the Doug Boles move, will we get an answer by next week's episode, whether we record Thursday or Friday of next week?
At this point, I don't. It doesn't seem like it, does it?
I think we will, because I think they're supposed to be testing at Sebring next week. So I think we'll get an answer.
Well, let's hope so. The more time they have to test, especially at Sebring, would be advantageous. So
yes.
Let's just get it over with. Put Renus VK in the car, in the seat, and let's go. Yeah.
Now, do you expect him to be full season, or do you think it's a ride share?
At this point, it's tough to think that it's a full season. I feel like if the money was there, it would have already been announced. So I'm going to say, unless some big money comes up or a package is put together on either side, I think it's at least a half season or a ride share situation, or hey, he's going to be in the seat for 6 races and then see what happens. I expect that, as opposed to him or anybody else being named in that seat for the entire season.
I would agree. Between him, Catherine Legge, who's competing at ARCA this weekend at Daytona, along with Elio Castroneves, who will also be in the Daytona 500 as well, Toby Sowery, Hunter McElroy, VK, Legge. I think it'll be some combination, 2 or 3 of those 4.
Yeah, I imagine in some capacity the drivers you listed, and maybe we'll know by this time next week.
Yeah, hopefully. So let's start things off. And the biggest news, Jay Frye out, Doug Boles in as not only the Indianapolis Motor Speedway president, but also the president of IndyCar as well. A massive change announced a couple weeks before the start of the season. Now, apparently there were rumors of this deal being done at the end of the season after Nashville, just now leaking now. There's so many angles we can get into with this. First off, Doug Boles is a fan favorite. He's done a tremendous job promoting and leading the Indianapolis Motor Speedways. They've basically experienced a renaissance within the last decade, and I think a lot of that helped with him. He was at one point a VP at IMS and head of, I think, PR, and then shifted into that main role, and he's done an outstanding job in that role, which he will continue to be in, just marketing the 500, the Speedway. He's done an outstanding job. Adding a new role, I find it very interesting. And I think we started this off with, okay, everyone loves Doug Boles, but is this too much on his plate, and how will this be done? I understand there are other names here that were added on to leadership. They finally have someone in charge of marketing, which is really, really positive in terms of that. But, man, this is asking a lot of someone, and I hope it works out, but it seems pretty tough in terms of what he's being asked to do here.
Yeah, I don't want to come off as somebody that's not a fan of Doug Boles, because that's exactly the opposite. What he's been able to do, and you mentioned it as well at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Indianapolis 500 in particular, has been nothing short of amazing. We've mentioned it before in years past, leading up to the 100th running, that could this be the apex of the popularity of the Indianapolis 500? And after you got past the 100th, and people that were kind of holding on to their longtime tickets to see that 100th race, then after that, it would kind of start shrinking a little bit, and it's been the opposite. And he's done a tremendous job, but we've also been told over the last years and years that running the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is a full-time job all the way through the season, between May and the Brickyard and IMSA and everything else going on at the Speedway, and even testing, obviously, and when they had the Christmas light thing, there's always something going on at the Speedway, and the upkeep and just handling a property of that magnitude, it seemed like was definitely a job that kept the president of the IMS Speedway in very busy,
and especially because
he's going to do both.
Well, and especially because he's very hands-on as well in the role in terms of interacting with the fans and being more forward-facing. Jay Frye was maybe not as forward-facing and wasn't interacting with the fans as much, but his focus was more on the competition and technical side. Doug Boles kind of more forward-facing, focused on PR and promotions and marketing. And yes, IndyCar made some other roles that they announced. Mark Sibla promoted to Senior Vice President, IndyCar Competition and Operations, so that would kind of take over some of that. Kyle Novak, IndyCar Vice President of Officiating and Race Control. And then there was another role, and I apologize, Alex Dameron also announced in a marketing capacity. So it's asking a lot of a guy who's already doing a lot. And again, we reiterate, we love Doug Boles. How is this going to impact in terms of what he does with IMS and also what he does with IndyCar?
I guess my big thing is Doug Boles is very good at what he does, and we've seen that over the years at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But the issues, the obstacles, the barriers for the IndyCar series going into the future aren't really things that Doug Boles is strong in addressing in terms of new car, in terms of luring OEMs, in terms of all that stuff. Like you mentioned, he's a very outwardly guy. He's a guy for the fans. He loves to go out and visit fans. And you mentioned PR. That's his background. It doesn't strike me. He checks a lot of the boxes that I feel that Mark Miles checks. And now Doug Boles doesn't put his foot in his mouth as often as Mark Miles does. But I'm also wondering, why do you need both of them?
Well, and some have speculated as Doug Boles eventually replace Mark Miles, as Mark Miles is, getting up there in age in terms of, I think he's around 70 or so. And then real quickly, so Alex Dameron is now he was the corporate communications vice president for Penske Entertainment. He is now the chief marketing officer. And then Lewis Kissinger has been at IMS in different roles, named the track's general manager of operations. So between those two, and then also with Mark Sibla with competition, they're in theory taking some of the load off so that Miles can continue to be, or not Miles, but Boles can continue to be this forward-facing kind of role as IndyCar and IMS president, in theory.
In theory. I just, I feel like, and here's something we don't know, is how long has Jay Frye been not around? It sounds like at least since the end of last season, but when's the last time we heard Jay Frye on the record? It's been forever, right? I mean, did we even hear him last year during the season?
I think so. I mean, he was apparently at the content days, which was a month ago, and he's been around, okay. But this is, it's been pretty quiet on that front. And Marshall Pruitt had a Q&A asking, questions, and he was up front, but he said, why did you fire Jay Frye? And Mark Miles basically said, well, we're not going to get into how things unfolded with Jay Frye, appreciate his time with us, blah, 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 blah. So it's, not an outright denial, to be clear, but this to me sounds like Jay Frye either disagreed with the direction of how things were going with the new car. Remember how that story leaked and it did not go over well with the fan base and also with team owners. Maybe that's a factor here. Maybe he just wanted out. That's a possibility as well. Or maybe something completely different. But there's just so much to unpack with this that we don't know, that we're not going to know, but we can speculate. And that's what we're doing here.
And sometimes silence is everything. We have not seen or heard from Jay Frye in any capacity. And partly it could be he can't say anything, but not even hey, it's been great to be part of IndyCar for the last X amount of years. I'm going to miss my time. I appreciate ABC. Like, we haven't even gotten that.
Yeah, we did get a post from, I believe, his wife, who said 24 hours. This is when this happened, but said 24 hours and more than 300 text calls later from drivers, owners, officials, team members, sponsors, TV partners, OEMs, professional sport execs, and other motorsports sanctioning organizations. Maybe means Jay Frye really did stand behind his motto, which is make stuff happen, get stuff done.
That doesn't sound like a tweet you put out from somebody that had an amicable separation from the series he was working for, does it?
No, it does not.
Based on what we know in how Roger Penske and Penske Corp runs things, it does not tolerate dissent within its ranks. You follow what the mandates are and what direction the series wants to go in. Whatever Roger wants, whatever the Penske Corp says, they don't want anybody going against that, right? No negativity. That's just an outward expression to fans that's very much also from within. Everything's rosy and great, right?
Yeah.
If you challenge that notion, of which we know that Jay Frye is that type of person, then you can ostracize yourself from everyone else. And again, this is all speculation, but I just feel like the direction of IndyCar, whether it's competition, whether it's development of a new car, whether it's whatever, I don't think Jay Frye was on board. And Jay Frye isn't a guy that's just going to fall in line. All due respect to Mark Miles, I think he's a guy that just falls in line. All due respect to Doug Boles, I think he's a guy that just falls in line. Jay Frye was not that, and that's why he's no longer with the series.
That seems to be the best explanation for what happened. Now, on the flip side, Doug Boles, who's going to be a lot more, at least he comes across, and again, this is us speaking from afar. We're not involved in the meetings, but Doug Boles, I would say, is probably a lot more PR savvy, obviously, than Jay Frye. I don't think that's a stretch. And does that maybe help in some of the discussions with partners and manufacturers and all of that in terms of closing deals? It's not going to hurt, right?
Right. I just feel like maybe he's the guy that comes in and, or, makes sure everybody is being schmoozed and all that. I don't know if he's the guy that you want at the head of the table talking about how, switching, brake providers is going to help the series, or, opening up regulations for this part or that part like dampers is going to help competition. That's not where you want Doug Boles dabbing himself into. Is that a Mark Sibla thing now? I don't know.
Yeah.
But Jay Frye, when he was hired, it was, what did we hear? It was just how respected he is across multiple racing series. And even Graham Rahal had a post that he was disappointed to see Jay Frye was gone. And he's like, I'm still excited about where the series is going, but man, we lose a lot with Jay Frye out the door. And I think that's a fair assessment to say without really making it sound like we're coming down on Doug Boles. I just feel like he is great at what he does. Jay Frye is great at what he does. And I just don't see that meshing very well. It's in a Venn diagram. I don't think they overlap very much.
Yeah. I think
like Doug Boles is a more polished Mark Miles.
I think that's the point we're trying to make because, again, cannot reiterate this enough. We love Doug Boles. He does a great job with the Speedway. Is this role going to take away, or have they hired enough people in roles under him to manage, some of the things left in? And on paper, yes, they've reassigned some people and promoted some people. You mentioned Graham Rahal's comments. He said, "I won't sugarcoat it. Jay Frye is the best man I've ever worked with in my years of racing. Make no mistake, this is a bummer to see him go. Am I excited for the future of IndyCar? You bet. Am I disappointed to see a man of high class, integrity, and great vision leave? Yes." I think two things can be true here, and I think that's kind of where we stand. I guess moving forward, you have to think about, okay, IndyCar has this great opportunity. And what they accomplished with Jay Frye, they accomplished a lot. Remember, they were in the thick of beginning of the Aero Kit era, and then you had the 100th running the Indy 500 thrown in. You have Fernando Alonso coming for the Indy 500, and I get that Jay Frye is not responsible for all these things. I'm just saying this is during his tenure. You have then the Universal Aero Kit in 2018. You have the development with Red Bull Technologies and the Aero Screen in 2020. Then you have the hybrid. And then stuff is stalled out as we wait for a new car. I don't think that's a coincidence. The hybrid was kind of forced through by Honda, and that's where we're at. And in a way, it's like, Penske maybe sees this as, well, we didn't land a third or fourth OEM, and we need someone else to try to lead that charge. And maybe that's why this move was made, and maybe Jay Frye didn't like the direction of where the new car was going. And so that led to a disagreement, and so both parties decided to part ways. Again,
and I think
pure speculation.
Nathan Brown did a good job at the Indy Star kind of breaking down this decision. And once Penske and Penske Corp took over the series, and this is from Nathan Brown's article at IndyStar.com, Jay Frye's decision-making was very much stripped away.
Yes.
In terms of the series. And he never got it back. And for a guy that is so hands-on like Jay Frye, you take away a lot of that power, and it can definitely impact you, for sure. But I feel like when Jay Frye was hired a decade ago, it really set IndyCar on a path and made us say, hey, there's somebody in charge now that gets it and knows where IndyCar needs to go. And you mentioned some of the things that were brought in, either directly done by Jay Frye or heavily influenced by Jay Frye. This move now, the challenges that the series is facing going forward, I don't feel one iota more confident with the new leadership structure that those things get done. Maybe they do, but I just don't have the optimism that I felt when Jay Frye was brought on board, and you looked at his resume and you said, okay, this dude gets it in terms of competition. I just don't feel the same way based on these announcements.
Yeah, I guess same here with Jay Frye. Well, then again, if he truly was stripped of all his power, then why did it matter, in terms of what he was going to get done or not, because he didn't really have that authority anymore. But at least our perception, right? Our perception was that, okay, you have someone who's well-versed, who's been working in that role essentially, since 2015. He had started at IMS as a chief revenue officer, other roles, I think, back in 2013. But his focus since 2015 was IndyCar president, and done a lot. But like you said, his power and his decision-making in terms of development of new cars and everything, I mean, once the hybrid was rolled out, I mean, that was kind of it in terms of what he's been able to do. And it just, maybe we're reading too much into it, and it's just that both parties saw it was the logical conclusion to his tenure. But like you said, with so much on the line with this new Fox Sports TV deal, adding races, you have Arlington next year, potentially Mexico City, potentially Denver in 2027. You're continuing to look at international races. We've heard the song and dance forever, over a decade. Not sure what's actually going to happen, but you're in a key time. Plus, you got to convince Honda and Chevy to stay and add a third OEM, all basically in the span of the next 3 months. There's a lot to figure out here.
And I just, it feels like the Penske and Penske Corp and look, he's a billionaire for a reason, but things are run a particular way. And if you don't fit in, if you don't go along with what he wants and the board wants, you're probably going to find yourself thrown to the side. And I think that's kind of where Jay Frye found himself after Penske Corp took over and tried to hold on for X amount of time, but maybe just saw that his expertise wasn't needed anymore. But we don't know the intricacies of him leaving. What we do know is his role was very heavily diminished once Penske took over. And now it'll be a storyline to watch in terms of how things are handled behind the scenes in terms of competition and all that stuff from a guy that we don't know too much about.
Yeah, and we've been lucky enough to have Jay Frye on this podcast in the past. Obviously, we've had Doug Boles on this podcast several times as well. Very much appreciate having both of them on and look forward to how this plays out. And I think our hope is just that it feels pretty seamless and we don't really notice that there's a change just beyond that Doug Boles has added in addition to his title. I guess my fear is anytime in an organization we have someone take on an additional role as someone departs, that never feels like it comes from a position of strength of the organization. It always feels like it comes from a position of weakness or cost-cutting from the organization. And that's my fear here.
That, yes, it's another aspect of things too. And just, by the time we get 3, 4, 5 races into the season, are we still talking about this? You hope not. But as we go into a year, 2 years, 3 years in the future, there's some big things that need to be checked off in this series to continue it moving forward. And is the behind-the-scenes staff up to the task? And I don't think any of us have the answer to that question.
No.
Roger Penske feels like he does, but we'll see. There's definitely been some strides in certain areas. Of course, the Fox deal is huge, but I've mentioned it before, and I'll continue to mention it. This feels like the last best chance for IndyCar to find itself as a popular racing series again. You're not going to get another opportunity to have every single race on network television. This is not going to happen. And if you don't grow based on this season and beyond, based on the opportunities you have at Fox, then maybe we just need to accept that the glory days are permanently behind this series, and it just is what it is.
I think some of the glory days are behind, and that's not IndyCar's fault, and some of it is IndyCar's fault, obviously, with the split. But I think you have so many factors, right, that came all at once. You had Foyt and Mario retiring along with other stars and Mears and so on and so forth. You have the split. You have the end of tobacco money within, the next decade or so. All those things kind of converged, and spending has changed for companies, and you got to find different ways to provide value. And in theory, if IndyCar has a new car that has a lot of cool tech aspects, you're never going to be Formula One, but back in the 90s, they were competing on the level of Formula One. And that's obviously changed drastically. And not to say they can get back to that, but if you provide relevant tech and make it worthwhile for your automotive partners, your tech partners, everyone, your suppliers, you could get back to that. And the Fox deal is, I think, step one in a very long step process of giving yourself that opportunity once again.
I think the first step is this season and seeing a considerable jump in TV ratings. We'll definitely have that. It'll be spun as that because obviously the ratings are going to be higher with every single race on network, but will they be consistently above 1 million people watching per race outside of the Indianapolis 500? That's what I want to see. That's growth to me, and legitimate, tangible growth. And if IndyCar can't pull that now with the investment that Fox is making, we'll talk about that too with the commercials around the Super Bowl, then maybe it's just never going to happen. So my eyes will be on those ratings, and IndyCar will spin them and say, oh, we're up 28% from last year. Well, of course you are, because you didn't have every race on network. But I want to see if they're able to pull 7 figures for more than just one race.
And I think the other aspect is with all the races being on the same network, does that build ratings as the season goes along? Are you looking at the possibility where ratings are getting stronger at the end of the year as opposed to falling? And part of that before was just competing against the NFL. They're not doing that this year. But also, does that build momentum, right? Are we seeing kind of a snowball effect as the season goes along? More people realize, hey, I can find IndyCar every race on this network. It's not hard. And does that help? And let's shift, because it's kind of a good segue with the Super Bowl.
Well, you brought up it real quick. I'll throw it in real quick, because you bring up, and maybe this is a greater conversation for down the line, but you bring up a good conversation is that IndyCar, what is it, 17 of 18 years, something like that, has gone into the final race with the championship on the line. Mm-hmm. Yet the ratings do not indicate more excitement as you get closer and closer to the end of the season. And while we're not saying that there needs to be a change in how IndyCar crowns a champion, I don't think you can argue the fact that it lacks the excitement that other, not only racing series, but sports have towards the end of the season. Is that something that needs to be addressed by maybe something we don't like in terms of a format? But when you're getting, 354,000 people to watch on network for your season finale race last year at Nashville, that's not good either.
No.
So I think it's a greater conversation we have sometime later, but I think it is an interesting conversation to have. Nobody wants to change the format. Nobody wants to go to a playoff format like Cup. But at the same time, you're not really engineering a lot of excitement down the stretch run of the IndyCar season.
No, and I think having the momentum building with the Fox deal, it's only going to help. Look, it's not going to hurt. I will be stunned if we see a TV rating at or below what we saw for last year's season finale Nashville. It's just simply not going to be that bad, right?
Well, as long as you're not going up against football,
Yeah, well, you're racing on a Sunday, Labor Day weekend, so that is tough, but I think it'll help tremendously compared to what we saw last year.
Yeah, well, it's not the NFL, that's for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think something else too. When we talk about the 26 schedule with the
World Cup,
the World Cup on Fox, is what does the schedule look like next year? Are they having to race deeper into the fall because June and some of July is taken up by the World Cup on Fox?
Yeah, so we will see
future episodes for sure.
Absolutely. So, and speaking of Fox Sports, look. IndyCar got great promotion. What was it worth? Like $30 million. You had the Pillow ad, the Pato ad, the Newgarden ad, all run during the game, right? Plus, during pregame, you had a new tires promo, about a 15-second thing. You had Joseph Newgarden there with Joey Logano on the pregame show, both guys with Penske and Shell cars, promoting the Daytona 500 coming up this Sunday, and obviously the Indy 500 and IndyCar on Fox as well. You had Jack Harvey there with his partner Invest, with kind of a tailgate setup as well, separate from all the Fox promotion. And the fact that you had was it the Newgarden ad or the Pato ad going into halftime, before the halftime show?
It was the Newgarden ad, right?
I think.
I do believe.
I forget.
I think Pato was the first one, then yes. Newgarden, then Pillow.
Yes. So either way, I mean, look, it was the most watched halftime show ever. It was the most watched Super Bowl ever. I mean, what more could you ask for? Over 133 million viewers. Kendrick Lamar got 133.5 million viewers. Best Super Bowl halftime ever. The game itself, just shy of 128 million, 127.7 million viewers. That included Fox, Tubi, Telemundo, Fox Deportes, and NFL digital outlets. Best Super Bowl pregame audience ever. All these spots ran during pregame. The game peaked at 137.7 million. That from 8 to 8:15, which that's what, start of the third quarter, roughly, or during the third quarter. I mean, this was a blowout, mind you, and the game peaked in the second half. I mean, when this game was a blowout, when it was 17-0, and then you get to halftime, and it's like, this is over, right? You just thought, okay, this sucks for IndyCar because, of course, you get a blowout in the Super Bowl, and some of your promos haven't aired yet, and no one's going to see them. I mean, I get it; it's still the Super Bowl, but you're not going to maximize it. IndyCar got lucky. People apparently love watching the Chiefs lose. and the Eagles win. So
yeah,
just outstanding all around.
It was too, if it was any other team getting blown out, maybe they would have turned the channel, but you're like, hey, it's Patrick Mahomes. It's the best player in the league. Could he pull something out of his hat like Tom Brady did against the Falcons? So I think that kept people's interest maybe a little bit more. But it was really cool to see the spots. And this time last year, if people would have told you and I that IndyCar was going to have 3 commercials during the Super Bowl, we would probably have tried to get you committed.
Yeah, or something. There's no way. Like, you go back to, remember, people were mad because there was a rumor of NBC offering all network, but apparently that turned out to not be true. And people were mad that IndyCar didn't go with NBC. And then fast forward a few months, and this TV, I mean, it's just phenomenal. And we haven't even started with races yet. And I understand we got to see what they do with the package itself. But you could not ask for more promotion and more commitment from your partner. This is about as good as it's ever going to get in terms of hyping up IndyCar and the Indy 500 on a TV network partner.
It's been phenomenal, and hopefully we'll see a little bit more cross-promotion coming up on Sunday at Daytona.
Yes, and I'm sure we will. Again, would expect to see a driver or drivers at Daytona for this. And in terms of other future promotions with this campaign, this is from Marketing Brew, Indy 44, finding this. Campaign will extend beyond the football season. This according to an official. Marketing plans like a Valentine's Day tie-in since the holiday, which is coming up as we record this on Thursday, February 13th. Tomorrow's 100 days to the Indy 500, so we'll see some sort of tie-in as well. Then obviously Daytona as well coming up on Sunday. So still more opportunities to promote prior to St. Pete.
And Fox will take advantage of every single one of those coming up this week. I'm sure we'll see some stuff the week after at wherever they're racing week. I don't know, what is it, Phoenix or whatever they usually go to.
Phoenix, I think.
So, for the next couple of weeks. And, then it's early March. Then we're at St. Pete with the season kicking off on March 2nd.
Yeah, hard to believe that it's all happening so fast all of a sudden.
How much do you feel it's important to have some bangers out of the gate on Fox?
You mean in terms of races?
Yeah, like some entertaining racing.
I mean, it obviously doesn't hurt. I think it's okay because you're building up to the Indy 500.
Yeah.
So, hey, stick around. We have the Indy 500 coming up into May, Memorial Day weekend. I think you need to make sure that we've had this debate before, right? It's more important for the Indy 500 to be an entertaining race than it is for the Indy 500 to be a dud, but the rest of the season be a banger in terms of what that means for IndyCar and getting sponsorships and deals and whatnot. It all comes down to that one event.
True. I think, though, this year is a little bit unique because of the investment that Fox is making in terms of advertising, and maybe you pull a little bit more casual fans into that season opening race that you otherwise would. And if they tune in and it's a stinker, it's rarely a stinker at St. Pete, but you know what I'm saying, then how quick do you lose them? Then, your second race at Thermal and, there's no grandstands, I mean, how quick would people turn it off if there aren't really good races to start? I don't know. But hopefully there's an influx of casual fans that tune in, they like what they see, and they continue to watch throughout the entire season. Don't
discount the fans that Will Buxton will bring as well, who are F1-centric fans, and what they will bring to the table to see racing like this that they may not have seen compared to F1. I think that's a big factor here.
Absolutely. It probably is a long shot, but I would love to see a highly respected F1, even like a Sky Sports, do a story or a featurette on Will Buxton and making the move. I think that could really help. But then again, what does Sky Sports want to do to push?
Yeah, I mean, they do air IndyCar.
That's true. But yeah, I would love to see it and make sure that people that follow F1 are making sure when they're looking for Will Buxton's F1 coverage know what he's doing now.
Oh, for sure. All right, we will move forward with the mailbag and news and notes, our random split air driver of the week here shortly. Don't forget, if you like what you hear or if you disagree, well, we'd love for you to interact with us. You can always find us on your favorite social media platforms, whether that's on Twitter/X or Instagram. Our handle is IndyCar Podcast. On Facebook, just search for New Track Record. You can email us your questions, comments, or rants, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. And thank you for supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier and others for their support. And as always, download and listen for free on your favorite podcasting platform, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Okay, mailbag time, and quite a bit to get to in terms of people sharing thoughts on obviously the TV spots and the Doug Boles move. So going back to last week on we talked about Fanatics. Run_Mark_Run said, Justin hates Connor and loves Fanatics. We need to get him in a dunk tank for Carb Day. Have you ever been in a dunk tank before?
You know what? I don't think I have. Have you?
I don't think I have either.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I would have fun with it.
I've been to places that have a dunk tank, but I don't think I've ever been in there.
Like at a carnival or festival, that kind of thing.
Yeah, carnivals and stuff like that, but I don't think I've ever been a target.
Yeah, no, I think that would be fun. S2000_Moose, you'd mentioned the World Cup dates and the conflicts in 2026 for IndyCar on Fox. June 13th, 14th, 20th, 21st, 27th. Tough to get a racing on Fox. 4 to 5 World Cup games each day. World Cup schedule opens up a bit, though there are 2 games July 4th and 5th. And then also how many races are on Fox TV in 26 will depend on how definitely IndyCar schedules around the World Cup in June. And then the last World Cup game in Toronto is July 2nd. So you're looking at basically a month long, 3 weeks to a month, that it's pretty tough. But I think you find a way to work around it, right? I mean, this is what you have to do. This is their job as schedule makers.
Yes, I think just like we saw with the Olympics, was it last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to make do. Maybe and that's why we discussed it last episode. Maybe there's some more FS1 or some FS1 races next year to make it through the World Cup.
Or maybe you have IndyCar races earlier in the day or later in the day with World Cup games sandwiched. Well, look, if you have the World Cup as a lead-in for IndyCar or IndyCar leading into the World Cup, that's a win-win.
Definitely. Absolutely. We'll take that. So maybe there's opportunities there instead of obstacles.
Yes. Exposure for IndyCar on Super Bowl Sunday with all the promos. Lynn_IndyCar said, this is amazing news and marketing that IndyCar is getting from their new TV partner in Fox. Just think how much Frito-Lay pays for a commercial spot in the big game, $20 to $30 million. Fox is giving up in revenue to broadcast all 3 commercials. Shevchenko adds, so far Fox doing pretty much everything you could ask for in a TV partner. Now everyone involved in IndyCar need to make sure this season is one worthy of Fox's hype. Yes. IndyCar fans need to make the extra effort to tune in and show up to demonstrate to Fox this is all worth it. Right? The groundwork has been laid. It's whatever happens next is to be determined.
And that's the big thing. And Lynn brought it up. Fox invested a lot of money, or at least cost itself a lot of money, to put those spots on. That's the expectations that Fox is putting on IndyCar and saying, you know what, we're going to, instead of banking another $40, $50 million in commercials, we're going to market this. So they have high expectations. So IndyCar and its fans, and hopefully a whole bunch of new fans, will show out, turn on the TV, and watch to match the expectations that Fox has for IndyCar. They're not light because look at the money that they're costing themselves with these spots.
I posted a poll on Twitter/X. Which IndyCar on Fox driver promo was your favorite? Just Newgarden, Alex Pillow Award. 58% said Newgarden. 40.6% said Award. Only 1.4% said Pillow. I thought it was fascinating how much of a route it was.
I mean, that's the order that we each had it in.
Yes.
But man, I mean, Palou's the most popular driver, yet got 1% of the vote, and
no,
a fair amount of people don't like Joseph Newgarden.
Pato got over 40%. You're mixing up.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So Palou, that's interesting because, you have the guy people love to hate now, and Joseph Newgarden. You would think it would have cost him more. Maybe it did, because I thought Newgarden's was the clear-cut number one.
Yes.
Partly because it was the first one to release, but I thought it was great. But Pato's was great. I mean, Alex's was great too. I just like the other two more.
Yeah, I would agree. Newgarden, Pato, Palou. I think we both agree on the order in terms of the promos. But either way, they're better than any promo I've ever seen for IndyCar in my lifetime. All three. In terms of done for the series, either for the series or by a TV partner. The only other thing I can think, I mean, you had Target ads back in the day with Zanardi and Vassar. You had Michael Andretti in a Honda ad where he was driving around on streets kind of in the suburbs, and there was a guy in his passenger seat, and he was giving him directions, and Michael said, okay, up here at the stop sign, you're going to turn left, and then you're going to turn left, and then the guy asks, do you ever turn right? And Michael says, why would you do that? Now, this is obviously the IRL days, but it was really funny, really well done. But those are the spots that stick out to me. Beyond that, I can't really think of anything that's noteworthy in the last 30 years.
I was just watching the Super Bowl, and my son, who's not really an IndyCar guy, the Newgarden one came on, and he was like, was that a sperm? From watching the Newgarden. And he has to tell my wife, Mom, there was that commercial had a sperm in it. And so, yeah, it caught his attention. And, unlike most of the commercials around the Super Bowl, where they're good, or the good ones you can never remember what the product was for. I mean, it's easy to remember what that was for.
Yes. A couple other responses. This on the news of Doug Boles taking on the IndyCar President role as well. Kojo617, was Jay given the door or leave on his own? We'll never know. Hunter's Way 67. How has Miles survived? He should have been let go instead of Jay, and then added gonna miss Jay Frye. Yeah, it's tough because it feels like something else. And you had posted this. Doug Boles and others for years running IMS is a 24/7, 365 job. IndyCar names Doug Boles president of IMS and the entire series. Us with the kind of the emoji, like the thinking emoji. A few replies here. Rob _McMahon said, this is a lot in all caps for one person. Doug Boles will work his tail off, I'm sure. Hopefully he has a lot of support and good subordinates that will push his agendas, which, again, according to the release, there are those people in place. It's just whether the execution is there. Lynn _IndyCar adds, guys kind of thought this was happening due to Doug making a visit to Denver. All of a sudden there's chatter about an upcoming Indy race. Hopefully Doug can hire team members to help him. Is Doug trying to be the next Tim Cindric? Tyler _Allen, all caps, negativity not allowed. Hunter's Way 67 said exactly too much on his plate. And then Brady BC3 said, I guess as they pass a lot of IMS duties down to a VP or someone lower, which based on the org chart that they added, it seems like that is the case. But again, all this TBD until we see it play out.
Do you think eventually we see a Doug Boles that is strictly the president of the IndyCar, and there is somebody named president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway?
I would think Doug Boles would get elevated higher and just be CEO of either IndyCar and IMS. I see that in his future more than him stepping back from one of the roles.
Well,
so like an elevated
stepping
title.
Back, but like being elevated. I can see that for sure.
And then this Crash Gladys also chiming in my thoughts exactly on that. So thanks for your comments there, and a couple other things to get to in the mailbag. We have the IndyCar Fantasy, which we'll get to. You get 6 drivers, a $100 million budget, in theory, right? It's a game. And a new game, Grid Rivals is the app. You can find us. New Track Record Podcast is our league. It is free for you to join. It is open for you to join. We posted on all our social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter /X, the link for you to join. There's also an invite code. You can find that as well. But again, just message us on any of the platforms if you have any issues. But you're free to join. I think right now, last I checked, we're up to like 18 people. I think last year, did we get above 50 in the league?
I think we had above 50 that initially signed up, and then we only had maybe like 40 that participated. But it's already exponentially better because we have people that were still competing like in the 23 and 22. We created a new one each year, but you could just re-up, I guess, in the old system. And, we can actually put a link out for people to go to, which
what a concept.
We couldn't do before. What a concept. Finally, IndyCar gets into the 21st century by being able to put a link out to join their fantasy. So I don't know why you have $100 million. I mean, you could just easily make it $1,000 or $100.
Yeah, they did, what, $100 budget before, right?
Yeah, I don't know what the difference is between $100 and $100 million other than the fact that the numbers go up. But, no, I'm looking forward to it. I think we're at 21. I just checked on the app. And looking forward to getting things started and make sure you get registered and signed up before the race at St. Pete.
Yes. And best of all, again, it's free. Now, there is like a daily fantasy aspect of it that is separate from the IndyCar Fantasy Challenge presented by Firestone, which the grand prize, I think, is 2 VIP tickets for an experience of the 2026 Indy 500. The daily fantasy thing is separate. So they do other motorsport series as well. And I believe it's not legal in Indiana anyway. So it's irrelevant to those of you in Indiana. But again, the fantasy thing, it's free. You don't have to pay any money. That is separate from the daily fantasy aspect, which again is available to some residents across the U.S. It's very limited. But all in all, excited for this new feature, and I hope it works out for IndyCar. I really do.
It is definitely an upgrade, a significant upgrade already. Hopefully it continues into the season.
So that's a look at the mailbag, and time to shift to news and notes. And where should we start? Let's start with the series formerly known as Indy Lights and a couple announcements there. Juncos Hollinger pausing their program. They didn't compete, I believe, in 2022. They had one driver that was set to compete, Miguel Maria Garcia, in 2025. They suspended operations for that series. Not IndyCar, again, just the series formerly known as Indy Lights. This is, I guess, not a surprise. They missed the test last week, so it looked like it was trending that way. And I really think, look, for a small team like them, unless what you have in Indy Lights is bulletproof in terms of budgets and personnel, you got to focus on getting IndyCar right, especially in the charter era.
You absolutely do, and I just feel like another indication that the struggles for that team, and you hope that there's an influx of cash coming from somewhere. They said it was temporarily stepping back from Indy Lights. I would be surprised if we see them return, quite frankly.
They've done this before and come back, so we shall see.
True.
Elsewhere in that series news, another driver for HMD, Liam Skeets. I hope I said that right, or Skiats. But he will complete the St. Petersburg driver lineup in the opening race. I believe he's from New Zealand, but he will get the start there. He is a winner in the USF Pro Championship program in 2024. He'll be making his debut. Completes the 9-driver program to kick off the season.
Did they have double digits last year?
I don't think so. I think 9 was where they maxed out as well.
9.
And then you also had livery unveils for Andretti and Andretti Cape. Very cool stuff with what they put together.
Really?
Yeah. So you can check that out on
I haven't seen those. I'll have to take a look.
And Andretti Indy social media for their 4 cars for Andretti, and then I think the Cape ones as well. But good stuff from them in terms of livery unveils. Okay, let's just get right to it. Let's talk about OEMs. Always a fun topic on this. And this was an interesting story that I saw as I try to find it here. This from autoaction.com/au. So it's an Australia site. Interesting they have this, but Tom talking about OEMs and finding a third and whatnot, and a lot of stuff that we know. But what I found interesting in this article is it discusses, the current power plant crisis with Chevy and Honda, and they need a third to alleviate for Chevy and Honda. But this is the part that stuck out. It is believed that companies currently discussing IndyCar include Toyota, Hyundai, Ford, and although this may be a practical joke, Lamborghini. Now, Lamborghini was in discussions before, were they not? Over the years they've been in discussions, but remember in the last decade we've had Toyota. Really, in the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've had Toyota, Porsche, Ferrari. Was Lamborghini one of the other ones? Obviously, we had like Chrysler with either Dodge or Alfa Romeo all in the last decade as well. In fact, I think a couple of times they've been a factor, but this is the first time I've seen real thought on actual manufacturers. We knew Toyota before, and then that kind of ended, and now maybe with these new rules, maybe they're back in the fold. Who knows?
The one that really, I can't remember about Lamborghini, but Ford has incessantly said that it's not interested in returning. So does that, if this is true, I think that's a big news, or does it kind of poke holes in this report saying, well, we know Ford isn't interested, so we have to take this with a grain of salt? I'm not sure.
I didn't think Ford was interested, so that was a surprise to me as well.
Yeah, it just makes me wonder, is this a reputable source naming Ford or not?
Yeah. So we'll see. But that's the latest on third, fourth, etc. OEMs.
We'll revisit this topic next week.
Yeah, I'm sure.
More exciting updates.
I'm sure we will. Let's talk about some other news and notes items. Roll through these. Iowa Speedway, this from Jordan Bianchi, who covers motorsports for The Athletic. Iowa Speedway track president Eric Peterson says there will be no major adjustments to the track surface in advance of its August NASCAR weekend. Also anticipates Iowa being a sellout. Tickets go on sale sometime in March. Look, that means no PJ1 or PBJ or resin or anything. So that's positive. The problem is it was on there before, so does it really make a big difference? We'll see.
Well, we knew that the onus was going to be on IndyCar to fix Iowa this year. I don't think it helps that nothing will be put on there this year. So IndyCar can take what they learned last year and apply it, hopefully at least. So them not adding anything is definitely a plus for IndyCar, but the series is going to have to figure out what it needs to do to make that more than an absolute stinker like it was last year.
Yeah. I can't believe I skipped over this. Racer.com mailbag with an intriguing thing in terms of Marshall Pruitt saying, through 2024, I had a single team owner tell me they were keeping a firm eye on Penske Entertainment's decisions and actions in the next year or two, because if things didn't improve in a variety of areas, they're prepared to leave IndyCar at the end of the current chassis engine formula. That owner was an outlier at the time. I've had a second owner say the same thing in the last few weeks, fearing they might need to pull out of IndyCar and find a more functional organization to race within, which means it's not just one owner thinking this, but two, or more accurately, two are comfortable enough. And then goes on to say, I've had a third say effectively the same things as the other two, but I didn't believe them. So who are the three? The one that would say it, but I don't believe, I for whatever reason, immediately went with Ray Hall.
Yeah, that seems...
They're pretty tied to Honda.
We know...
Yeah, it's not Chip, it's not
Chip
Penske.
And Roger are chummy. So I feel maybe Juncos is one of those in there.
Okay.
And I quite honestly think McLaren is one of those.
Okay, and then who's the one that's kind of a half believe?
I would say Coyne.
Okay, my three that I believe are Andretti, or excuse me, my two that I believe, Andretti and McLaren, and then the half one is Ray Hall.
Okay.
I'm sure we're all wrong.
No, it'd obviously be bad. Yeah.
It'd be bad either way if any of these people left. You don't want anyone leaving.
Yeah, I mean, this series can afford to lose a couple owners maybe at the bottom.
Yeah.
It can't afford to lose one or two of the big four.
Yeah, if you lose McLaren and or Andretti, I mean, that's a huge loss for the series.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty obvious that one of them is McLaren, because
yes,
Zach Brown is always open to talking about what he would like to see in IndyCar going forward, very little of which has happened. And not saying that Zach has all the answers, but he's in a position to where he feels like if he gets to a point where he's not being listened to, or the ideas that he has that maybe are shared by others in the paddock aren't being pursued, McLaren doesn't need IndyCar to be successful. And now that it's sniffing around sports cars, makes it interesting.
Yes.
He said when they initially got an IndyCar, they wanted to be a racing presence in North America. They didn't say they wanted to be a racing presence in IndyCar, North America. So just keep your eye on that.
That's an excellent point. The Snake Pit lineup has been announced. And,
veritable who's who.
Yeah. This is the first year I can recall where I don't believe I've heard of any of these artists. So the headliner is...
We're not the target audience.
No. But it's more the realization that I've completely aged out. Not that I was ever really... but the headliner is Elynium, which I may or may not have heard of. I think I'm convincing myself that I have. So in reality, I have not. Sammy Vergi, Keizo, Oliver Heldens, and two friends. That is the lineup for the Snake Pit. Tickets are on sale. ims.com/snakepit. So I assume you have not heard of any of those artists either.
Well, we are not, again, we're not the target audience.
No. Elsewhere, speaking of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the IMS Museum announces that Helio Castroneves will be inducted into the IMS Hall of Fame class of 2025. Induction ceremony and dinner will take place Thursday, May 22nd. Tickets on sale, IMS Museum on their website. So congrats, he is the lone nominee. This is a given, right? And he'll be competing in the Daytona 500 with the Project 91 Wendy's car with Trackhouse on Sunday. So looking forward to that as well. Kiffin Simpson, this is by far the favorite livery I have seen. The number 8 Journey Rewards car is outstanding. You have pink, you have black, you have yellow. I think you have a little blue mixed in. This is the kind of bold livery that I wish we saw in IndyCar.
It reminds me of just like a bag of Skittles or something like that. Like it's eye-catching. I like it.
Yes, it is truly phenomenal. A little bit of red, I think, as well. I mean, this is some black. This is outstanding, and that car's really going to stand out. So I'm looking forward to seeing that on track and hope it looks as good on track as it does in pictures. But that's my leader in the clubhouse for best livery so far. Would you agree with that?
Simpson can. Yeah, no, I agree, and we'll see if Kevin Simpson can be in the picture a little bit more this season with that really striking livery.
Yes. I know you love talking about this, so I'll just mention it. Jenna Fryer said the lead attorney representing Alex Palou against the McLaren lawsuit has changed firms, so Palou went with, and his new firm is Michon de Rea. This firm represented Princess Diana in her divorce from then Prince Charles. Oh, fascinating tie-in there.
Wow. Amazing. Can't wait to get an update on that.
And then one final note before we get to tweets of the week. IndyCar odds, championship odds, Alex Palou the favorite, obviously. These are via DraftKings Sportsbook as of today. Alex Palou plus 230. Scott McLaughlin plus 400. Newgarden plus 500. Pato and Colton plus 800. Power and Dixon plus 1,000. Then you have Kyle Kirkwood plus 1,800. Ericsson plus 2,000. Rossi plus 2,500. Felix Rosenquist plus 3,000. And then it goes on and on from there. You have Lundgaard, Ferrucci, Malukas plus 4,000, and so on. But Power and Dixon plus 1,000. That's fascinating.
And McLaughlin having the second highest odds.
I feel like McLaughlin, like Pato was kind of the preseason pick last year to win the title. I feel like McLaughlin is the preseason pick this year. We haven't made our picks yet, but I feel like that's the buzzworthy pick going into the season.
Seems like it. Is he ready to be, if he hasn't already reached it, the most consistent driver across all tracks within Team Penske?
He's got to do it, right? Because Power was that guy the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, apparently the bettors think so, with the second best odds.
Tweets of the week time. We start things off. A couple of tweets, I think, from the Super Bowl. I think there was one in particular that I saved. It's Leonardo said, I don't know who Pato Award is or really anything about IndyCar, but this commercial I keep seeing has me obsessed. That got some traction in the IndyCar community.
Nice. Which is the point.
Yes. Joey Barnes 85, former writer for motorsports.com, posted the GIF, everything is awesome. This was in response, I think, to the Boles news. And then Christopher DeHarta had posted the new front revolving door at the IMS Museum, and it said museum on top. And then Indy 44 edited it with IndyCar above the revolving door. Thought that was very clever.
Very nice.
And those are our tweets of the week.
They sold their $53 million Formula One car, a Grand Prix car. So to prove they're just IndyCar. But all right, speaking of IndyCar, speaking of Champ Car, rather, we're going to go to 2003/4 and Roberto Gonzalez.
Okay.
Out of Mexico City. Monterey, to be exact. His first race in kart/Champ Car was 2003 for Dale Coyne Racing. He was 17th at St. Pete. He then appeared later in the season for Herdez Competition, a team that I've never heard of, which eventually became HVM Racing, apparently.
Was this Mario Dominguez with that, or was this Adrian Fernandez?
That's a good question. Let's see, 2003, he was it was with Dominguez and Roberto Moreno.
Okay.
In 2003. But Gonzalez only did 2 races that year, St. Pete to start, and then the Mexico City race, how fitting, being a native of Monterey, where he finished 10th later on in the season. In 2004, he came back with PKV Racing, KV, Kevin Kalkoven, and I think Craig Pollock was part of that, which was the leftovers from Pac West, I believe.
I think so.
But they did the entire season with Roberto Gonzalez in 2004. His top finish was at Monterey, the streets of Fundidora Park, to be exact. He finished 9th. He also had a 7th at Cleveland that year and finished 15th in points that season for PKV Racing. And that was pretty much it. After that, he got out of Champ Car. He was gone for a good 7-8 years, then got into World Endurance Racing and LMP2, did 24 Hours of Le Mans, actually won it in 2022 in the LMP2 class with Yoda Sport.
That's a team that Tom Brady owns, right? Is a part owner?
Yeah, I do believe. Yeah, I think so. And so he's still out there racing. Again, with Yoda Sport, won the World Endurance Championship in 2022. That was the same year he won Le Mans as well. And did some WeatherTech sports car races in 2018. So a guy that, while he didn't do Champ Car and open wheel for very long, has had a very successful racing career. Still 48 years old, a native of Monterrey, Mexico. A high finish in 2004 of 7th at Cleveland for PKV Racing, Mr. Roberto Gonzalez, this week's Random Split Era Driver of the Week.
All right. Well, I think we covered it all. I don't think we missed anything, right? And next week,
I know if we did, we'll be back next week anyway.
Yeah. Well, and next week we'll have, I think, some Sebring testing where, you have most of the field testing there. And then another week, and then it's race week. Hard to believe. We've survived the offseason. It always goes quicker than you think.
Definitely, we survived, and hopefully when we get racing, maybe we can mix in some 50-degree days in these parts. Feels like ways away, but if you can give us a couple of those here and there, it would really help out.
Oh, for sure. All right. Well, for Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. Thanks for joining us on another edition of New Track Record Podcast.